actually, this is the skull of a polar bear. Now, polar bears are the largest land predator alive today. In fact, this is its skull. Of course, as you can see, it has an enormous nose because it has a sense of smell that's 20,000 times more powerful than a human's. Of course, that comes into great advantage because where they live in the Arctic, because polar bears have been observed going in a dead straight line for over a kilometre, who pick up following the scent of the carcass of a seal or a whale that they wouldn't have been able to see, but they would have smelt from over 40 kilometres away. They probably don't have that much better a sense of smell than their close cousins, the brown bears. But where they live in the Arctic, where there's no pollution, no trees, and no mingling scents, they can pick up the scents that easier. And of course, these teeth, these huge canine teeth, they're about as long as my little finger, and they are driven by your sturdy jaw muscles that give the polar bear probably the strongest bite of any bear. I mean, it's certainly strong enough to bite through flesh, blubber, and even bone. Of course, I would not want to go up against a polar bear because I would not last 30 seconds. Now then, I'm going to show you all the ones that I'm most proud of, which are birds' eggs. Now, these first ones are framed of bird egg replicas, and of course the brown dark speckled ones are that of a lapwing. Of course, the big white ones are from buzzards, well, a common buzzard. Both the bird, in fact, all these birds on here are native to Britain. And the green speckled ones belong to carrion crows. The small blue ones, they belong to a song thrush. And the smaller brown egg, they belong to the common kestrel. And the white ones, small white ones, are from the turtle dove, which is a bird that is found in Britain. Well, it's a migrant bird that is slowly making a comeback in the rest of Britain. And bear with me a little. Here is a replica of a merlin's egg. Now, the merlin is probably the smallest falcon in Europe, and it's found throughout on heathland and moorland, and of course it feeds on insects like dragonflies and damselflies, but it will also catch songbirds like thrushes, pipits, and starlings, but of course the biggest bird it would catch is the skylark, and of course that was a delicacy on a rich man's table back in the medieval era, and ladies of the noble courts would fly merlins to catch starlings or skylarks. But I'll talk about that another day. Of course, these are fincher eggs. Of course, there's a hawfinch egg, a chaffinch egg, bullfinch egg, a goldfinch egg, and a greenfinch egg. And of course, these are all birds that you can find in your garden, but of course I'm not sure about hawfinch. I mean, they are the largest finch in the UK, but I'm pretty sure they don't come to gardens. Of course, what's in this box is actually one of my most prized possessions. It's a sunbird skull, that was given to me by my great aunt and uncle when I was quite little. Of course, it might be a finch of some species, I'm not entirely sure, but this has been one of my most treasured possessions for many years. I'll try and get it to look a bit bigger for you. Because this has been one of the items that I have cherished more than any throughout my life. And this is the tooth of a sheep. Now, sheep are herbivores, which means they feed on grass and leaves. Of course, they don't need serrated edges to carve through flesh. They just have blunt molar-like teeth that can grind up grass and twigs and ferns. And this here is the bone from a bird of some kind. I can tell it's a bird because inside is a honeycomb-like structure, because bird bones are built very differently to mammal bones, because they're not solid, and they're actually hollow and made of a honeycomb-like structure. Now the next thing, and I've been really excited to show you all this, is another possession of mine that I'm quite proud of. This is the largest egg that is laid in the modern day. It's an ostrich egg. Now, ostriches are the largest birds alive today, and they lay probably the biggest egg in the modern age. And of course, the ostrich egg is very large, and it's also quite tough. It's made of very hard shell, and of course that comes in an advantage because it's hard for a predator to break into the ostrich egg, but also the bigger the egg, the more developed the hatchling will become. In places in Africa where ostriches live, quite often they'll lay a large brood of eggs, and of course some of them that are in the perimeter become sacrificial eggs that get eaten by predators because the ostrich can't possibly brood them all. But even so, just the thought that this is an egg from a bird that is alive today absolutely blows my mind. This is another egg from another bird that's alive today. It's in the same family as the ostrich. It's an emu's egg. You'll see it's a little bit smaller and a more oval shaped, and it's a dark green because the emu lives in Australia, so it probably lives out on grassland or in forests, so it needs its egg to be well camouflaged when the parent isn't standing over it. Now, as a size and shape comparison, here are the two largest eggs in my collection. Ostrich egg, which is laid by the largest bird alive today that lives in Africa. Emu egg, a lot smaller, oval shaped and dark green, laid by a bird that lives in Australia. And in this bottle here is wolf hair. I'm not sure what kind of wolf it's from, but I know it's wolf hair because I looked it up as soon as I got it. And in this one here is a feather from a snowy owl. And snowy owl is, to me, one of the most beautiful birds in the world. Of course, they're great hunters of the Arctic tundra. This is an 1860s cutting from a newspaper in the Victorian era, and it's got about the Mayan people who are native to New Zealand, and the giant bird, the moa, that used to live there. Now, the moa was the tallest bird in the world, but of course it It probably stood about 3 meters tall, but of course it wasn't the largest. That title belongs to the elephant bird, but of course the moa is another example of wherever human beings have gone, megafauna, which is giant animals, have gone extinct because the Maoris ended up driving the moa to extinction. But of course that's in another video of mine. And of course in here are some feathers that I collected over Easter last year in Wales. They're a pheasant and a pigeon feather. And of course also, and these are, because this is another one that I picked up while I was in Wales. It's the tail feather from a pheasant. Now, the pheasant is not native to Britain at all. They were actually brought over from the reed beds of Southeast Asia by either the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, or the Normans. Of course, this is a new addition to my collection. It's the feather from a goose. Goose feathers were used a lot to make quills, which were what people would write with back in the medieval era. But I think that it is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Of course, as I mentioned in a previous video, I've also got insects, but I'll get to them in a minute. Because this is probably, you're right now, the current jewel of my collection. It is an eggshell from the largest egg that has ever been laid. It is from the egg of Aethionis maximus, which is known as the elephant bird. Now, the elephant bird was the largest bird that has ever lived. You've probably seen me mention it in a couple of PowerPoint presentations. Of course, it laid the largest egg that has ever been known, and it was very, very thick, solid shell. And of course, no one's entirely sure how this bird went extinct, but as I said, I've talked about that in a couple of previous PowerPoints, but this is where I keep it. I would love to own a fully constructed elephant bird egg. The only two problems with that are A, they're incredibly rare, and B, they're very, very expensive. Now, I'm going to show you all some teeth from animals that have ruled the seas for millennia. In fact, they are the teeth from sharks. Sharks have been around on the planet for over 400 million years, and they've evolved into the ultimate marine predator. In fact, they were around long before the dinosaurs, and they come in many different shapes and sizes and feed on all kinds of different things. This one is the tooth of a mako shark, which is the fastest shark in the sea, and they have teeth that are almost like fish hooks, as though they can grip onto slippery, slimy fish. And in fact, if you look a little bit closely, you might be able to see the serrations along the teeth. In fact, if I was to rub my finger along the end of that for a long period of time, I'd probably end up getting cut. Of course, this is the tooth from my favourite shark. It is the tiger shark. Tiger sharks are probably the most generalist feeders of all sharks. In fact, they will feed on all kinds of things. I mean, they don't just eat fish, they will also eat carrion, like dead meat, but they will also feed on mammals like dugongs and dolphins. They will also eat seabirds, other sharks, and even incredibly turtles. And you're all probably wondering how they cut through the shell of a turtle. Well, that's all down to the shape of this tooth.